I'm happy to let Wanda Nielsen use the house until the kids graduate from high school. Mr. Nielsen will continue to take care of the mortgage and utilities. In addition, Wanda will receive half of the value of her husband's business. Ms. Nielsen can keep her car, and Mr. Nielsen will keep paying for it. I'm also giving Mrs. Nielsen 60% of all the assets, including all bank accounts, investments, and retirement accounts. I'm also giving Mrs. Nielsen primary custody of the kids. As for visitation, it'll be the standard. Mr. Nielsen will get 2 weeks in the summer and every other weekend. Child support will be $750 per month for each kid, for a total of $1,500 per month. Mrs. Nielsen hasn't worked outside the home for the last 5 years, so I'm also adding maintenance for her at $2,000 per month. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days unless Mr. Nielsen cancels the petition. Then, the Honorable Judge Marie Matthews finished the court proceedings with her gavel. She was just starting to stand up when I said the one word that would change everything for the next several months of my life. No. Judge Matthews stopped mid-stride. She turned around so fast to look at me that I'm surprised her neck didn't snap off. She looked totally shocked. It was like she couldn't believe someone said that word where she was. She started moving back to her chair, and her face went from shocked to totally furious. When she returned to her seat, she looked so upset that the very idea of her could have frozen water on the sun. She was really angry. Excuse me.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
Excuse me, she said. I don't know what's confusing you, or if you're confused about the in or the out. If that word is so confusing for you, I'll gladly explain it. I replied, I'm not stupid. I'm aware of what's about to happen. The thing is, I really don't care. I had actually planned for this. I could feel the excitement in the air, and I knew the next few minutes were going to be really fun for me. I gave him a gentle warning, saying that if he didn't apologize, I would have to cite him for contempt of court. Well, at least you'll have given one correct ruling today, then. I'm sorry, but I have to say I have nothing but contempt for this railroad you were running here. I spoke. My lawyer was whispering harshly in my ear as he began fumbling through his briefcase. I couldn't help but wonder if he was searching for something to gag me with. In that case, let's see how much contempt you have after spending 30 days in jail. She sneered as she banged her gavel again. I hadn't realized that we'd somehow ended up in Australia. But then I remembered that we must have been, given all the kangaroos in the courtroom. My lawyer was becoming a bit of a distraction, as he was almost yelling at me to shut up and trying to put his hand over my mouth. Want to try for more? You know, you're a real piece of work. Honestly, if you were having a little more sex now and then, you wouldn't be such a tough cookie. So why don't you take this? I held up my right hand, middle finger extended, and gently placed it up your ass, while this, extending my left hand similarly to my right, gently went up your constipated asshole. Then you can ride them to climax, which might actually make you less of a man-hating psychotic bitch. In my humble opinion, you might be in need of a little self-care. Oh, Lee. I thought someone would call 911 about that time. I thought one of two things was about to happen. Either she was about to have a stroke or her head was going to explode. I was actually surprised that the smoke coming out of her ears wasn't visible. I didn't think it was even possible for someone's face to turn that shade of red. It was like she was emitting death rays from her eyes. Yes, Virginia, she was angry. 90 days. Her voice was so low and threatening, it was almost demonic. Luckily for my lawyer, that's when the bailiffs took hold of me. He looked pretty miserable, and I felt sorry for him. Everyone in the courtroom was shocked when I just couldn't hold it in any longer and started laughing hysterically. I think that's why the psychologists came to see me in prison for the next couple of weeks. The letter from my lawyer's firm the next day stating that they were dropping me as a client wasn't a surprise. I bet you're wondering what all that was about. Well, I'll tell you, but first, let me give you a little background. My name is Michael Nielsen. I'm currently 31 years old. I was born to a very nice, middle-class couple in the heartland of America. I was raised on traditional values, where there was a strong sense of right and wrong. You learned to respect those who deserved it. You didn't cheat. When you said something, you meant it. Work hard, be generous with what you have, and live up to your values. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a simple concept, but it's one that many of us could benefit from remembering. Do unto others as they have done unto you. The Christian way is to turn the other cheek. I'll admit, I've had my struggles with this one. I've always had what some might call an extreme stubborn streak. When I was a kid, I was very sensitive to injustice. Sometimes that's led to some pretty tough situations. When I felt let down by someone, I'd set out on a mission to right the wrong. There was one time in high school when I was dating Cheryl Haskins. We'd been going steady for a couple of months by then. We had an argument about something that I don't even remember what it was about. We'd get into a fight and I'd break up with her. I say break up in quotes because it was sort of understood that it was only temporary. We'd apologize to each other a couple of days later and get back together. This wasn't the first time and it wouldn't be the last. We'd use the weekend to cool off and make up on Monday. But then, one Saturday, I happened to be walking past the theater and I saw my cousin Harold with Cheryl. Two things here. Harold and I were more like brothers than cousins. We were the same age and had been inseparable for as long as I can remember. His family lived on the same block as me, and we grew up together. I knew he also liked her and I thought it was nice. He knew that we had broken up, but he also knew that we would probably get back together after the weekend. But he just doesn't do that to each other. From that point on, he was kind of a lost cause to me. When Cheryl tried to talk to me on Monday, I just ignored her. At church on Sunday, Harold approached me, eager to talk, but I just stared at him, not knowing how to respond. When he finished talking, I just turned around and walked away. His family came over for Sunday dinner, and I just didn't feel like talking to him. He tried to play video games with me, but I stopped playing and went to my room. Our parents kindly tried a few times to encourage us to talk, but I politely declined. Even a year later, after I'd gone as far as to steal his girlfriend from him, I still refused to have anything to do with him. I did get a little physical when he confronted me about his girlfriend, but that was the extent of it. Years later, he invited me to his wedding, but I didn't go. When I married Wanda, I invited everyone from my family, but he was the only one who didn't make the cut. I guess I'm a bit of a tough cookie and tend to hold on to things. Here's the thing. When someone does me wrong, I don't forgive unless it was an honest mistake. What Harold and Cheryl did was done on purpose. I know that might make some of you think I'm a bit of an a-hole, and I don't blame you. If that's the case, then I'd like to kindly ask you to consider my perspective a bit more. I truly believe that we should all be responsible for our actions and face the consequences of our mistakes. If you make a mistake, it's important to fully face the repercussions. If you're caught driving under the influence, you might lose your license for a while, pay higher insurance, and do community service or whatever else is involved. If your job depends on you driving, you might lose your job. In my opinion, that's a tax on stupidity. If a girl gets pregnant at 18, people call it mommy for the next 18 years. And if a guy gets pregnant by hooking up with his prom date, he should be responsible for the kid. It's all about being responsible for your actions. That's what we call personal responsibility. I don't believe in shouldering the financial or emotional burden of others' decisions. I put in the work during high school and my grades reflected it. I was fortunate enough to receive some great scholarships, which allowed me to attend college. I was pretty successful with the ladies and my grades stayed up. I was always on the better-looking side, and I worked to stay healthy. I may have gotten into more than my fair share of fights in high school because of my personal beliefs, but I learned a lot from each one. I won more often than I lost, and that's a pretty good track record, right? I was in pretty good shape, and it seemed like the ladies liked that about me. I graduated with an economics degree and an accounting minor. After that, I went on to get my MBA, and then I got a really nice job at a big company that paid me quite well. Being single with not a lot of bills to pay, I started playing the stock market. I found I had quite a knack for it and did pretty well. It wasn't long after that I met Wanda at a party. We got along really well and I asked her out on a date. She said yes and we just went from there. I have to admit, she was quite stunning. Looking back, I find it amusing. I mean, how many guys are ever going to say their girlfriend is but ugly? Sure, she may be ugly to someone else, but to them, she is beautiful. I can say that Wanda is beautiful because she always attracts attention whenever we're out, and all my friends have commented on how they'll try to move in if we ever break up. Even some of my lesbian friends have commented on trying to turn her if she becomes available. Eventually, I asked her and she accepted. And just like that, we got married. I should probably mention that Wanda did go to college, and I like to joke that she went for her Mrs. degree. She didn't get that, but she did graduate with a degree in art history, which qualified her for her job as a barista at Starbucks. For those who might be a bit puzzled, the term Mrs. degree is a playful way of saying a woman who goes to college with the idea of postponing adulting for a little while and then graduating with a husband to look after her for the rest of her life. I'm sorry if that's a bit harsh, but I'm an arrogant prick. I'm sorry if that's not your experience. We settled into marital bliss. She quit her job a week before the wedding and started becoming Susie Homemaker. Our love life was amazing, and we bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house. I was doing well at my job and making good money playing the stock market. We weren't spending a lot, so we were able to save up a nice little nest egg. I put all my bonuses into our investments and maxed out my Roth contributions. I had this big dream of retiring before I was 40 and enjoying life to the fullest. I was doing really well in my job, and my employer was recognizing my hard work with big bonuses and promotions. I was on the fast track up the corporate ladder. A few years after we got married, I came home from work one Friday evening to find her dressed to the nines. She had a huge smile on her face as well. She gave me a playful nudge, saying, "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're going out to celebrate tonight, Daddy." My goodness, couldn't believe my ears. I was shocked. We've been trying for a few months now, so it wasn't like this just came out of the blue. Still, it was a surprise when she said that it finally happened. I gave her a big hug and showered her with kisses. We thought we'd tone down the celebrations because of the pregnancy and the baby, but we partied like it was still party time. The next few months were all about joy and getting ready for the new life we were bringing into the world. Then, a couple months later, we got another shock, twins. There were 2 little girls in there. I was eager to shower them with love and have 2 little girls to call my own. I was on top of the world. The day finally came. We rushed to the hospital, and a few hours later, our 2 little girls were born. They were absolutely beautiful, healthy, and had all their fingers and toes. Since they were twins, they had to stay in the hospital a couple of days longer than normal, but everything turned out fine. When we finally took them home, both families were there to greet us. It was a joyous occasion, and everyone was delighted. I couldn't help but notice my mom staring at them almost constantly. I think she was so happy because I finally gave her the grandchildren she had been wanting. Life had changed for us, and it was wonderful. I decided that working for the big company was keeping me away from my family too much. I had a lot of disposable income, so I decided to start my own company. I was doing pretty well investing and playing the market, so I decided to get the necessary licenses and open my own investment firm. I was already helping a few friends and relatives, so I invited them to become my clients. That's how things took off. After I opened, a few former colleagues moved their portfolios over to me. Within a year, I had a nice client list, and a few of them were talking to their friends about switching over too. When you're on top of the world, the only direction you can go is down. It was the girl's 2nd birthday party, and we turned it into a full-on production. Sure, they might not remember the details, but it was a celebration, and that's what counts. They'll be able to watch the videos when they're older and enjoy it then. It was a joy to see all the family from both sides there. We were all having a phenomenal time, until I was just about to come out of the bedroom after using the in-soot bathroom. I realized the hall bathroom had been in use. Just as I was about to get to the door, I heard my mom talking to her sister in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from." Mom asked, "Have you asked Michael about it?" Mayan asked, "Oh my gosh, no. I can't even imagine what would happen if he found out that they weren't his. He's so happy that would probably kill him." I couldn't listen to the rest. I quietly retraced my steps back to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I needed to collect myself and think. They had to be mine. I thought to myself, surely someone in our families has blue eyes. My eyes were a kind of mud brown. Wanda's eyes were a beautiful hazel. I thought. I went through a mental picture of everyone on all my relatives. The only one I could think of that didn't have brown eyes was my cousin Mary. Her eyes were a beautiful shade of green, a gift from her maternal side. I then started thinking about Wanda's family. I couldn't think of anyone on her side with blue eyes. After a while, I figured I needed to calm down and rejoin the festivities before I was missed for too long. I did my best to keep my feelings in check, put on a happy face, and went back to the party. It was a bit of a struggle for the rest of the day. I did my best to fit in with everyone, but inside, I was making plans to get away. Eventually, things died down and everyone left. As I tucked the girls in that night, I couldn't help but notice their features more closely than usual. I could see several features from Wanda. Others I didn't recognize. I couldn't pinpoint any that clearly resembled me. The next day, I was on my computer while Wanda took a nap with the girls. I ordered a few things I needed to be delivered to my office. I used a company credit card so Wanda wouldn't see the invoice. I also did some research on local PI firms. I couldn't shake this feeling that Wanda had cheated on me almost 3 years ago. If she had cheated on me then, was she still cheating on me now? I really needed proof if she was. A few days later, the stuff I ordered showed up. I also met with and hired a company called Pro Investigations. I gave them all the info on Wanda's cell phone, tablet, and laptop that they needed to hack in. I also started making some financial moves. If she wasn't cheating and the girls actually were mine, these moves wouldn't really make any difference. But if what I thought was true, it would make all that money out of her reach. I'm not going to pay for her to go around sleeping around, and I'm not going to pay for someone else's kids. I know the girls are innocent victims, but I'm a victim too. If she wants to have an affair and get pregnant by someone else, that's her choice. I'm not going to pay for that. I hadn't set anything in stone, but I was ready to do so. I was waiting on the proof, though. 2 weeks later, I got the letter at the office. I made sure to close and lock my door before opening it. I cried for an hour when I found out that they weren't mine. Deep down, I had already known that they weren't mine, but I had been hoping that I was wrong. The next day, my PI met with me and gave me all the proof he had gotten. It turned out that her personal trainer at the gym had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was still seeing him a couple days a week, and she even took the girls to his apartment so he could interact with his daughters. The audio confirmed that they both knew who the real sperm donor was. The next afternoon, I had an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I'm not stupid, you know. I knew the law was going to tie me to a table and drill my bottom without the benefit of lube. He offered some advice, but I respectfully declined. He explained how the law worked. I explained how I worked. In the end, he told me that it wasn't about being fair. It was about taking care of the kids. I agreed. She and her partner could absolutely take care of the kids just fine without me or my money. I shared my requirements with him and took my leave. I think he was beginning to think that he probably should have rejected me as a client then. Little did he know. I had asked him to get the documents ready, but to hold them until I called and said I was ready to file. I guess he thought I was trying to work things out. I know. I totally fibbed about that. Took 2 months. Everything was finished, and she didn't have a hint of a problem. I'm so grateful for that drama class I took as my art elective during my junior year. I had finally gotten to the point where I had, at least on paper, 0 net income and 0 assets, well, except for the house and a beat-up Chevy pickup. The house still had a big mortgage on it. We refinanced and took out the equity for some much-needed upgrades, so selling it probably wouldn't even cover the brokerage fees. My Lexus was actually owned by the company, not me personally. I had about $10,000 and some cash hidden away to live on for the next couple of months. Wanda was really surprised when my cousin Howard and his wife Cheryl showed up that weekend. I let her know that Howard and Cheryl had come to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago. After some heart-to-hearts, they admitted that what they had done was wrong. They apologized, and I decided it was time to forgive and move on. Geez, you folks are so trusting. Yes, we made up. It's true, Howard and Cheryl did come by my office last week. They apologized again, and I accepted their apology. I can assure you that's all true. I'm a man of my word. I'm not one to hold a grudge, and I'm happy to forgive and forget. I forgave them and welcomed them back with open arms. I might have missed a few little details, but that's it. It's funny how things happen, isn't it? Cheryl's family has a few members who, let's be real, sometimes bend the rules. Some of them are pretty big, and they're not afraid to get into a bar fight every now and then. I don't usually pay much attention to rumors, but I've heard a few times that one or two of them might be working for some businessmen in the area. But, that's just what people say. This doesn't directly relate to the story, but a few days before Howard and Cheryl came over, there was a news story about a personal trainer at one of the local gyms who got mugged after work. Apparently, he tried to fight off the 5 muggers, which, if you ask me, was a bit ill-advised. They took his wallet, car, and stripped him naked. The unfortunate man suffered severe injuries, including a broken jaw, a shattered nose, and a few broken ribs. The poor guy ended up with a broken jaw, shattered nose, a few broken ribs, a broken arm, a dislocated kneecap, and both testicles were ruptured. He'll be in the hospital for a couple of weeks, at least. It's heartbreaking to think about what he went through, and it's made me realize that the police really need to do something about the crime in this town. Unfortunately, they haven't identified any suspects because all the attackers were wearing dark clothes, gloves, and ski masks. The doctors said the blood, blonde hair, blue-eyed victim would likely make a full recovery after reconstructive surgery to his face and significant physical therapy. It's unfortunate, but it's likely that he won't be able to have sex again. It's possible he'll find out over the next couple of months that his car was taken to a chop shop and sold in pieces. His credit cards had been maxed out, his bank accounts had been cleaned out, and the info in his wallet had been used to steal his identity and put on the dark web. It'll be a long road to recovery for him. Wanda was pretty despondent and mopey for about a week after the mugging, which was weird. I guess she's also worried about the crime rate in the area. I offered to boost the security for the house, but that didn't seem to calm her down. On Monday morning, I gave my lawyer a ring and asked him to go ahead and finish up the paperwork and file it. I wanted her served on Friday late afternoon. He tried to talk me into making some changes, but I refused. On Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. I met with him at his office to finalize everything. He again warned me against my course of action. After some thought, I decided to humor him. I gave her the house and even threw in the investments. I made sure to include the important stipulation that I wouldn't be paying for anything else. If she wanted to keep the house, she could pay the mortgage and utilities. Oh, and there hadn't been a dime in the investment accounts for over a month. I was happy to give her everything, even though it wasn't much. What Wanda didn't realize was that I had been moving all my tools and equipment out of the garage. I had also been carefully moving things I wanted to keep out of the house. A lot of that was from my home office. I was storing the tools and larger items out on the ranch that Howard and Cheryl owned. The smaller items that weren't particularly valuable were moved to a small one-bedroom apartment in a complex owned by an offshore LLC. The owners of the LLC were surprisingly difficult to locate and verify. But Friday morning finally came, and I was able to move forward. I headed off to work as normal. I had Howard's help as always. I had moved my truck to the office a couple days earlier. I dropped off my car, hopped into my pickup, and drove to the bank. Once there, I thoughtfully cleaned out all the accounts, leaving a modest $100 in checking and savings. Then, I went to the safety deposit box and took care of that too. Then, I drove over to the ranch and put all the cash and contents of the safety deposit box with my other possessions. I didn't want them to find a newly rented box at another bank and seize it. I also didn't want anyone to trace a wire transfer. Besides, I would probably need the cash later. You might be wondering about why I trusted Howard and Cheryl. Well, it was pretty simple. You see, the mortgage on their ranch was held by a certain offshore LLC with rather murky ownership. We had our differences, but he's still family, and I'd do anything for him. To us, you don't mess with family. The rest of the family is pretty sensitive about personal stuff like that. It was a beautiful thing to see the family come together and make peace. I made my way back to the house. It was late morning by this time. I pulled over a couple blocks away and checked the GPS that I had installed on Wanda's car. Thankfully, she was at the mall as expected. I hurried home and parked in the driveway. I'd been busy packing up the rest of my clothes and belongings over the past couple of days and setting them in the garage. I tossed the few boxes in the truck, went inside, and grabbed the rest of my clothes from the closet and dresser. I didn't even bother packing them up. I just grabbed them by the armload, hangers and all. It only took a couple of trips to load everything into the truck. I didn't even bother closing the garage door or even the front door. As I was leaving the house, my cell phone rang. It was Wanda. I guess her cards didn't work when she tried to check out with her purchases. I took one last look at the GPS signal and saw that it was moving in this direction. I couldn't help but laugh and tossed my phone onto the table. I then walked out the door. A few minutes later, I was already several blocks away. When I arrived at my new apartment, I lovingly transferred everything from my truck into the appropriate rooms. After enjoying a few cold ones, I had everything put away. I had just sat back in my recliner when my new cell phone rang. There were only a couple of people who had this number, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was not one of them. "Hello," I answered. "She's been served. You should get the video soon." The voice on the other end said, "Okay, thank you." I answered before they disconnected. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, I got the video in my email. I'm sure you can imagine how shocked she was. Unfortunately, I only had the video from when she was actually served until she dropped to the floor like a sack of rocks. The kind guy who served her check to make sure she wasn't hurt then left. The video ended there. I would have loved to see her reaction when she started reading the divorce petition and realized I had DNA and video evidence of her cheating. After that, things moved really fast. I got a bunch of phone calls, including a few from my old office. She called multiple times to try and talk to me. Apparently, she didn't believe them when they told her that I had resigned and hadn't worked there for the last 2 weeks. Then, she actually showed up in person, wanting to see me. That didn't go over too well. In the end, the police had to be called to escort her off the property. Howard tried to reach me a few times. She started harassing him to try to get a hold of me. I think she figured out that his sudden appearance was a bit too coincidental with my divorce. I filed restraining orders for both my former company and Howard before she finally had to leave them alone. It was 2 weeks later when my lawyer finally got in touch with her to find out who her lawyer was. She hadn't gotten one yet. She was quickly running out of money. She had only a few $100s in her purse and the $200 I had left in the bank accounts. She was starting to lean on her parents for support. I was just chillin' and taking it easy. I wasn't planning on starting any projects for a while because I was planning on not being available for a while. I didn't want her to feel like she needed to take anything from me. In the end, she did decide to get a lawyer. They scheduled meetings, but I decided not to attend, opting instead to give my lawyer instructions. I'm not paying a penny more. I heard that things got a little heated at those meetings, but I'm sure everything will work out in the end. In the end, it all came to arbitration and I had to be there. Unfortunately, those meetings didn't go well. I heard some pretty strong language, like, "Where's all the money, asshole?" And "What money?" It made me realize that we're all in this together, and we're all struggling with the same financial issues. We're just a bit short at the moment. We're just a few bucks short. I was living in the cheapest single-bedroom apartment that I could find. I was just because it was cheap and I happened to know the actual owner of the complex. I had invested everything, all my savings, all my checking. But unfortunately, I had to let it go. I made a really bad investment. I'm starting to wonder if investing in a cheating wife is a good idea. I'm completely lost. Well, that was true. I didn't really know where all those offshore banks actually kept their cash. We're planning to give her the house, and we're just going to put her name on the title. I offered to get my lawyer involved. I'm sure he could have been a bit more forceful on that. Instead, he sounded more like someone looking at a tornado-ravaged house and commenting that at least rubble hadn't caught on fire. It's mortgaged to the hilt, and there's no way I can possibly afford the monthly payments. Wanda screamed. It was a tough situation. Child support. I'm not the parent, so I don't see why I should pay. Spousal maintenance, alimony for you Philistines out there. No job. No income. No way. She's demanding 70% of the liquid assets. I don't have any assets. I'm sure you'll be able to find them if you look. I'm sorry, but there's nothing to be found. She's asking for half the business. I wish you the best of luck with that. And 50% of the retirement fund. What part of lost are you having trouble with? Yeah, arbitration failed spectacularly. That brings us to our day in court. As I mentioned before, it was in front of Judge Marie Matthews, who, unfortunately, has a rather unsavory reputation. She was known for her strong views on gender equality, but some might say she took it a bit too far. She was particularly tough on men whose wives had cheated on them. If it was a man whose wife had cheated, he'd usually need to be carried out of the courtroom after she gavelled him down. I was in a tough spot, to say the least. I'm sure you're all planning on leaving me a bunch of comments for thinking I could successfully convince them that there was no money. You'd be surprised. I knew full well that they could simply look at the accounts from a couple of months ago and see how much was in there. So, I wasn't too surprised when the judge used those numbers to calculate exactly how much they were going to take from me. The thing is, they didn't have access to the accounts. I needed time to transfer it around through different banks and accounts. I even withdrew all the money from one bank and then went to a few different banks and deposited parts of the withdrawal into several other accounts. Of course, those accounts were in the money, and they had different names. One of those businesses that Cheryl's family was involved with was a gag gift shop where you could buy fake IDs for entertainment purposes only. That was even printed on the ID cards. I even had one that said I was Jesus Christ. I just loved pulling pranks on people. The victim would shout, "Jesus Christ," and I would quickly take out my fake ID and agree with them. The fakes were really well done. The only way to tell they were fake was because of the entertainment statement on the front. They were usually priced at around $50. Sometimes, they'd accidentally leave off the entertainment warning on the front, which was a little funny. I'd then electronically transfer the money into other accounts. Sure, there might be a way to track it down, but it'd be extremely expensive and take months, if not years. By that time, I'd be long gone. So, here I was back in front of the man-hating witch. I had been in the county jail for 60 days out of 90. Those short-term sentences were served in the county jail, not the state prison. So, have you learned your lesson yet? She sneered. You mean the lesson about not marrying a cheating woman? I learned that one long before I was ever in your court. I was referring to your attitude in my court. Her forehead was showing a little bit of a vein. I thought that might be bad for her blood pressure. I don't think there's anything wrong with my attitude, even though I was treated unfairly in front of everyone. I was really starting to worry about her health. I can only imagine how stressful it must be for her to be there, with all that pressure from the doctor. You know, I can keep you in jail longer, right? And if that's what you want, I can add another 30 days. I wanted to talk to you today about why you haven't made your first 2 child support or maintenance payments to your ex-wife. And where's your lawyer? I'm a little puzzled, though. I thought you needed to be really smart to be a judge. Thank you for setting me straight. Let me try to break it down for you so you can understand. I'm sorry if this is still a bit too complicated for you, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for a 5th grader. I was really worried about her bench catching on fire from the flame she was snorting at that point. I started thinking that she actually didn't like me. I'm in jail. I'm totally broke. Since I'm broke, I can't send any. Since it was your foolish actions that led to my incarceration, perhaps you could explain why the woman who cheated can't get the money that you were trying to steal for me to give to that 304? Do you understand what I'm saying? Or should I explain it to you in a way you can understand? So, they brought me back to my cell for another 90 days. 30 from my original sentence, 30 from her first outburst, and another 30 that I caught at the end. To be honest, it wasn't that bad. Sure, the food wasn't the best, but I still managed to eat it. I had a nice bed to sleep in, and lots of free time to relax. I made good use of the weights and exercise machines. I didn't have many problems in there. It didn't take long for my romantic involvements to become common knowledge inside the jail, which made me a few friends. Second, did I mention that Cheryl's family has a few connections that could be of help to someone on the inside? There was just one little hiccup, which came from one of the not-so-bright cousins. He had this crazy idea that he could get arrested for something small, get sent to the jail for a week or so, and use that time to teach me a lesson. But, let me tell you, the whole jail population knew exactly who he was even before he stepped foot in the compound. It didn't take much to figure out what he was up to. He was spotted halfway across the yard. Unfortunately, one of the inmates ran into him as he was trying to catch an errant pass while tossing a football back and forth. I'm sure the elbow to his gut was purely accidental. Once he was able to stand up and brush himself off, he carried on with his mission. After another 20 feet, he got beamed in the side of his head by a basketball. The guy who made the bad pass was really sorry. The elbow to the chin while he was being helped up was totally accidental. After shaking his head to clear the cobwebs, he started his trek in my direction again. There were 2 more little mishaps before he finally arrived at his destination. Since my back was turned, he thought that a sucker punch would be a good idea. I was pretty sharp, though, and managed to avoid it. I got the signal, spun around, and drove my foot into his crotch as hard as I could. It was a clear 65-yard field goal. Since his misfortune from all the accidents seemed to finally catch up with him, he was taken to the infirmary. 2 days later, he didn't want to come out to the yard to exercise. He spent as much time as he could in his cell until he was released. I ended. I'm back before the evil queen. Are you ready to say I'm sorry to her? I'm sorry for the outbursts in the courtroom. I'm not sure what you were talking about. Whatever. I'm sure you'll do your best to keep things civil and not extend your stay. I assume that another judge is going to be taking over? I must admit, you really surprised me this time. Should I start stomping my feet? I should probably see if they have a suggestion box. I should suggest that they have EMTs in the courtroom in case she actually has a stroke. I'm a little worried that you haven't made any child support or maintenance payments yet. You haven't paid the mortgage on the house or any of the utilities as I ordered. I thought we went through this last time. I'm sorry, but I can't pay anything as long as I'm here in jail. Second, since you put me in jail, I can't work and make any money to pay anything. And I'm not sure why I should pay for your kids, since they're not mine. My ex-wife is a bit of a player, and I don't think it's my job to pay for her to go around cheating on my dime. If she wants to be unfaithful, I think it would be better for her to get a job and take care of her own affairs. Maybe she could even start charging for it and make some money that way. And finally, you gave her half the business. She should have plenty of money from that. Your Honor. Wanda's lawyer jumped in. We haven't been able to take possession of my client's part of the business. It seems that Mr. Nielsen sold his company to an overseas company about 2 months before filing for divorce. We haven't been able to determine the actual owners to contact them about the court order. Then, a very pretty lady got up and asked to speak. Your Honor, I'm with the board of directors for the company that bought the business in question. I've come before you today with a motion to dismiss the ruling that gives Mrs. Nielsen any part of a business her ex-husband used to own. It's pretty unusual to give one person ownership of a business they're not even involved in the court case with. Since the purchase happened before the divorce was filed, this company isn't relevant to this case. So we're rejecting any claim of ownership or control by Mrs. Nielsen. But what about the money from the sale? Wanda, the transfer of ownership and payments were made overseas. I don't have all the details, but as far as I know, the money from the purchase has never been in U.S. territory, so it's not subject to U.S. loss. So, it looks like you'll have to talk with your ex about that money. Where's that money? I'm not sure. It's probably in another country. What country? My ex's lawyer asked. The first transfer was in Belgium, but I think it was moved to somewhere else after the sale. I'm not sure where exactly. Your Honor, my ex's lawyer spoke up again. My client is in a tough spot right now. The house is going into foreclosure because the mortgage hasn't been paid in 3 months. The utilities are about to be cut off. My client's parents have been so kind and helpful, but I'm afraid they're reaching their limit. My client has found a job, but it's only part-time at a local diner. It doesn't pay enough to keep the house. Mr. Nielsen, I'm asking you to please bring all the payments up to date within the week. Oh sure. Absolutely. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Oops, there isn't any there. I'm sorry, but I'm physically unable to comply at this time. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I understand. I'm sorry. In jail. I don't have any money. I'm unable to work while I'm here, so I can't make any money either. You might be thinking I'm rolling in it, but I'm not. Just ask the guards, they'll tell you. They check it every week. I'd love to pay you back, but I just can't seem to get the chance. I pointed out, Mr. Nielsen, you can have your lawyer access your accounts and transfer the funds to your ex-wife. First, as you can clearly see, I do not have a lawyer. Second, what accounts? You keep talking about these fandom accounts, but where are they? I keep trying to explain to you that I'm broke, but you refuse to believe me. And even if these accounts did exist, do you really think I'd have the access information memorized? I'd need to see my financial records to get the bank account and routing numbers to access them. But honestly, there are no accounts. If you really think these accounts exist, I'd love to see the info for them. I'm curious, what happened to the money from your checking, savings, and investment accounts? I've already shared my thoughts on the matter. It was a couple bad investments. I took a chance and lost everything. And what about the money from selling your company? The company was struggling because of those investments. I had to sell it cheap and use the payments to cover expenses. There isn't any money left over. Mr. Nielsen, do you really think the court is going to believe that? I shrugged. I really don't care. If you think I'm lying, just show me the account information where I'm hiding all that money. I think she stole all the money and is trying to screw me over while she's screwing her boyfriends. That doesn't even make sense, shouted her lawyer. It's as illogical as keeping me in jail without access to money and then demanding that I make all these payments you want. I replied, Mr. Nielsen, I'm just wondering if you're aware that I can keep you in jail until you pay? The judge asked. I just looked at her like she had just grown a third eye. Okay, I'll play along. I'll go along with it. Just keep me locked up and unable to follow your orders as you keep making impossible demands. That sounds perfect. 3 months later, the house had been foreclosed on. Wanda had lost her Lexus because she couldn't keep up with the payments. She was now living with her parents because she couldn't afford an apartment for herself and the girls. She was working 30 hours a week at the diner. They were doing their best to plead with the judge to let her out so she could start making some sort of payments. Loverboy had been released from the hospital and was in physical therapy. He was putting in long hours every day trying to sort out his money situation. The good news was that no new credit card accounts were being opened in his name. His credit rating was so low by this point that no one was willing to issue him any more credit cards. He only had minimal car insurance, so that didn't help. He didn't work full-time at the gym, so he had high-deductible health insurance. It was going to take years to pay off his medical bills. I finally got a lawyer. She made a deal with the judge to let me out of jail so I could get a job and start making payments. I had to hand over my passport because they thought I had more money stashed away and that I was planning to flee. I was a good boy and started working at the local Taco Bell. By this time, I was living at the ranch with Howard and Cheryl. They were just checking to make sure I wasn't hiding any cash. I was a smart guy, though, and I had a good idea who was keeping an eye on me. They weren't allowed on the ranch property, so they had to do their surveillance from the road. They were unaware that most of the cash was already in my possession. I did that for the next 3 months. One time, they used a court order to attach my wages from my job. I didn't care. I was making minimum wage, so it wasn't a lot. During that time, I was finalizing my plans. While I was in jail, Howard had emptied out my apartment, but I was able to get through it. He had thoughtfully divided everything up between my extended family. A couple of weeks earlier, several packages had been shipped from my extended family. I noticed that all of those packages were addressed to the same place. Several of Cheryl's family members had come by to visit at different times. We even had a few barbecues with them, as well as most of my extended family a few times. The surveillance didn't see that the guests would go to the sheds behind the house and take some packages back to their cars during the day. Over the next couple of weeks, those packages would be repackaged and shipped away. I spent my time either working or at home. I never went out. Eventually, Taco Bell had to get a restraining order against Wanda because she was constantly coming into the restaurant to harass me about the money I owed her. It was getting disruptive. They could have just fired me, but a little cash to the manager changed her mind. When I needed to meet with my lawyer, she came to the ranch. We had a lot of meetings. Oh, I didn't tell you about my new lawyer. Of course I did. She was there to represent the interests of the new owners of my former company in court that day. Once she finished that, I hired her as my lawyer. She's quite the natural, you know. Well, I prefer to think of her as a barracuda, especially when she's skinny dipping in the pool. She's sleek, lean, and will attack suddenly when I'm sitting naked on the edge of the pool. She also has a voracious appetite. Grin, what do you mean that it is unethical for a lawyer to sleep with their client? I did say she is a lawyer, right? An ethical lawyer? You're kidding, right? Lawyers believe scruples are what you use to pay in Russia, and morals or large paintings on walls. I'm sure you're wondering about my money. You're right, I did sell my firm. No, I didn't sell it to myself. I just wanted to make sure Wanda couldn't find any information that might help her take over the firm. I was planning to sell it. I just wanted the cash, you know? Since the sale was done overseas, and the money never entered United States of America jurisdiction, it wasn't subject to U.S. loss. The only way Wanda could get her hands on it was if I brought any of the money into a U.S. bank. But with the judgments against me, she could claim it. But that wasn't going to happen. It was a lot of money, and that was on top of the $10 million I had invested. I had about $200,000 in cash in the bank, plus some in my safes. I had already used some of it for my plans, but I still had around $150,000 left. I wasn't planning on taking any of the cash with me. It was a lovely Saturday afternoon. We were having another barbecue with the extended family. Everything was just perfect. The food was ready, the drinks were chilled, and the company was great. The party was a blast. I lent a hand to Howard with the grill and smoker. Julia, my wonderful lawyer, was there as well. Later on, one of Cheryl's uncles came up to me. He told me how thankful he was for my help to Cheryl and Howard, and how happy he was that we had finally been able to reconnect. We had a nice chat, and he surprised me with an envelope. I passed it to Julia so she could stash it in her briefcase. Later on, I made an announcement. I shared the wonderful news that the lien holder for the ranch had declared that the mortgage for the ranch had been paid off. This meant that Howard and Cheryl now owned the ranch free and clear. Everyone was so happy for them, and it was just the best feeling. We partied like there was no tomorrow that night. It was late when everyone started to head out. Julia had to catch a flight in the morning, so she had to head out. She left with a group of 6 other people. Strangely enough, her flight was departing from an airport in the next state. She had packed before coming to the party and had everything in her leased car. She never made it to her rented apartment. Instead, she went straight to the airport. Nobody saw the guy climbing out of her car in the parking garage, and no one noticed him casually walking 50 feet behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. Michael Nielsen couldn't travel outside the U.S. because he had given his passport to the court. Mitchell Nelson's passport never even got a second look. They held hands on adjoining seats on their first-class flight to Mexico City, and no one noticed. Julia Davis suddenly disappeared there. Instead, Jamie Nelson joined Mitchell Nelson for their connecting flight to Ecuador. 2 days later, Greg and Samantha Cooper reached their hacienda on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. They were now members of the Mile High Club. Strangely enough, an old Chevy pickup that looked like the one that went missing from Howard and Cheryl's ranch was waiting for them at the hacienda. 2 weeks after the barbecue, Michael Nielsen got a bench warrant for not showing up to work 2 days after the barbecue. He was let go for not showing up and not calling in. He hasn't made any payments to his ex-wife since then. When Howard and Cheryl were called to court, a lawyer in a $5,000 skirt suit showed up with them. She successfully argued that the couple didn't have any responsibility towards their cousin. He simply rented a room from them, and then he disappeared one day. They even sued him for back rent. All they could tell them was that he drove off in his old pickup one afternoon and never returned. While it was a difficult time for them, they were met with skepticism, as there was no concrete evidence to contradict their story. Over the next several years, Greg Cooper operated a small charter fishing boat, and his wife, Samantha, ran their small canteen. They were doing well for themselves in their little village. Their hacienda was one of the larger ones with several luxuries. They had a few guests stay with them every now and then. Harold and Cheryl were frequent visitors, as were other family members of Howard and Cheryl. It was a simple yet pleasant life for Greg and Sam. They were deeply devoted to each other and cherished spending their evenings entertaining guests in the intimate canteen or in their beautiful hacienda. Being kind and welcoming to everyone, they were quickly accepted into the small community. They were always ready to lend a hand whenever someone needed help. Greg was a regular on the stock market, balancing his time between his boat and the canteen. He even lent a hand to some locals with their finances. Oh, and the dishonorable Judge Marie Matthews. I actually laughed my ass off. A few years after I escaped to Costa Rica, Judge Matthews' wife, who was a lesbian, was caught cheating on her with a man. The judge had adopted her wife's 3 kids when they got married. Since then, Judge Matthews has been paying child support, maintenance, and house payments for her ex-wife. To add to the humiliation, her ex-wife quickly moved her boyfriend into the house and cheated on him with him. They acted like a typical married couple, except they never officially got married. I heard a rumor that they finally set a wedding date. It'll be a week after their youngest son graduates from college. Judge Matthews is still paying child support and maintenance until the child graduates from college or until her ex-wife remarries. The timing of the wedding is interesting, since it will be exactly 1 week after all of Judge Matthews' financial obligations to her ex-wife are satisfied. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.